Deep underground, in a top-secret research lab, security has been breached. A deadly virus capable of contaminating the entire world has been released.
Oh my god.
We have to get out of this building!
What was that? It's the brakes!
How is she still standing?
She isn't standing now.
No one is immune. Resident
What the is that?
G'day, my name's Chris,
And I'm Nathan.
and we're the Ghost Guy. We're not the Ghost Guys this time. Even though we are the Ghost Guys. What are we this time, Nathan? Maybe the
Podcast guys?
is this the Cinema Boys?
That's cinnamon. I was thinking donut.
The Cinnamon Donut Boys. the Sin Boys. Sin Boys is a website you don't want to go on when you're at work. Nah, but seriously, this is Cinema Biosis, the show where we look at some of the strange connections that exist between your favourite movies, or sometimes not your favourite movies, and other media, whether it be comic books, video games, whatever. And today, we're talking about one of Nathan's favourite movies, Resident Evil from 2002.
Yeah,
Is this your favourite Resident Evil movie in the Resident Evil movie series?
definitely not.
Wow, I'm really surprised. I would say it's probably my favourite, but we'll break down why that is. It's not a very complex reason. It's because it's the only one I can remember, because I just rewatched it, so that's perhaps why it's my favourite. But we should probably cover some of the basics. The movie stars Milla Jovovich, Michelle Rodriguez, and it was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who is a bit of a controversial figure these days when it comes to video game adaptations, wouldn't you say, Nath?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you like PWSA, Nath?
Not a lot of his work. Some of his stuff's been good, but I'm not a fan of what he's got coming up. So.
Ah, yes, Monster Hunter, which we might review. We'll see if we can sit through it in the cinema. That all depends.
God.
Look, I don't mind some of Paul W.S. Anderson's work. I really like Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood. That's him,
Wrong
right?
one, man. Wrong one, man. Wrong one. I was like, wait a minute, what? No, wrong one.
Look, one of my favourite side stories ever is that the Rotten Tomatoes picture for Paul Anderson, the director of There Will Be Blood, was a picture of Paul W.S. Anderson for years.
Really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
But no, seriously, Paul W.S. Anderson, I mean, I like Mortal Kombat as a guilty pleasure. I like Event Horizon. I'm not a big fan of pretty much everything after Resident Evil. You can kind of break up his work into two parts. It's pre and post, because everything after is what? Alien vs. Predator, Death Race,
Yeah.
your favourite movie, Pompeii, starring Game of Thrones.
Oh my god, I forgot that was even a thing.
So when it comes to the Resident Evil movie, I know I was super excited to see this in cinemas. I would buy Hyper Magazine to read up about the movie when it was coming out. I'd pore over the images, pore over like script leaks online. And when I went in and saw the movie with my dad, I honestly, at the time, thought it was awesome. In fact, I thought it was so good, it was the first movie I actually ever pirated. Because the DVD, back in the day in Australia, it'd take forever for a DVD to come out. So I downloaded a copy of the movie.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I downloaded a copy of the movie through Kazaa. The entire movie was 256 megabytes, and it took me 3 days to download on my 56k
Holy
modem.
crap, that must have looked amazing.
Well, it didn't help that the movie was pirated by someone sitting in the cinema with a home high 8 camera filming the screen. and the projectionist hadn't lined up the image properly, so the boom mic kept dropping in from the top, and sometimes the tape would be so worn you'd get flickers of whatever was shot years ago in the background. And it was still the best thing I'd ever seen at that time. And I actually haven't seen this movie in decades until recently. What about you, Nate? Were you excited?
Yeah, oh man, I'm a huge fan of Resident Evil. I loved the PS1 games. Yeah, it was just like, oh, finally a decent, like, it's a good horror story. How could you get this wrong? It's basically a horror movie in a game. How easy would it be to put on a screen?
Yeah, and like you said, you're a big fan of the Resident Evil games. I'm a big fan of the Resident Evil games. The last time I played through Resident Evil, the original one, was with you. And I don't know, it's been a big part of my life for a very long time, I would say, Resident Evil.
Yeah, we played through all three over, like, various weekends, didn't we?
Passing the controller back and forth like children. The giant children that we are.
That was great.
So, for those of you who don't know, who haven't experienced the Resident Evil movie in all its glory, or the story surrounding the Resident Evil movie, it's based on the 1996 video game Resident Evil, or as it's called in Japan, Biohazard.
Resident Evil.
And the plot for the first game is pretty simple. I mean, they do get more complex as the series goes on, and I mean, complex is a nice way of saying convoluted in this case. But this very first game, it's about an underground lab built beneath a mansion where all these experiments have been going on. Essentially, a huge corporation has been trying to create super soldiers, and because of this, a virus has leaked and it's infected everyone inside the mansion and the labs, turning them into zombies. The game came out for the original PlayStation and was later ported to the PC and the Sega Saturn, so the 5 people who owned a Sega Saturn could play the game as well. And obviously the series has become kind of this big titan of gaming. It's still around today, which is pretty impressive. And it's reinvented itself multiple times, so it's still relevant now, maybe even more than ever.
Oh, it's definitely changed the way horror games were when it came on PS1. There was nothing like it before, maybe Alone in the Dark on PC, but not on console.
100%. It's the game that kind of cemented the survival horror template. And I mean, for those people who don't know what a survival horror game is, how would you describe a survival horror game, Nathan? How would you describe the gameplay of the original Resident Evil?
You never have enough ammo to fight every enemy. You have to try and just survive. It's in the name. Resources are bare minimum, but that just adds to the scare of it, really. Anything can kill you.
Yeah, that's the terror of it. When we were playing through it recently, even, we were finding it pretty creepy, even though we're very, very familiar with the game. And just having that lack of ammo and not being able to fight anything is so terrifying. I would say, like, in general, it's pretty slow-paced as well. It's not like a fast action game.
No, it's not, that's for sure. And there's puzzles to it. Bit nonsensical, the puzzles in this day and age, but back then, you know, it was added to the gameplay. But just you end up figuring out what enemies in areas you can just run through and not waste valuable resources dealing with them.
There's like pretty much, there's like a strategy to playing the game. It's about managing your resources, managing how you will actually tackle certain situations using a map, using all the knowledge you can gain by reading artifacts you find around the location, you know, books, notes, things like that. It's kind of I would say it's a bit of a smart game. And I don't mean that in a pretentious sense, but I mean, you can't just kind of mindlessly tune out and play it.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's because, I mean, look at when it came out. You had things like, Crash Bandicoot and shooters and stuff like that. And everything was just about action, running forward, getting a score, seeing how many things you could collect or destroy or whatever in the level before you get to the end. Then you got this game that actually you have to slow down, think about what you're doing, manage your resources, and survive. And it was also helped that it was terrifying at the same time. It was really good.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of merged very cinematic techniques, like in the camera angles, because the engine at the time couldn't handle complex 3D backgrounds, so they would have these locked 2D backgrounds that look like cinematic movie shots. And I mean, like, as well, it had that really, really well-written cinematic script and amazing, amazing voice acting.
Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life. But Barry, didn't you say you're going back to the dining room to do some research? Why on earth are you here?
I just had something I wanted to check. Now, let's get back to searching for the lost captain and Chris, shall we?
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah.
And it really had those cinematic aspirations as evidenced by the introduction video, which was shot in live action. My favourite trivia piece about that opening live action video for the video game is that the person playing Barry is some Aussie principal who was just over there on a trip in Japan, and they're like, oh yeah, this guy can act in this.
He's like, yeah, all right.
So, Nath, would you say the movie is a pretty good adaptation of the game when it comes to story?
That's what I was going to bring up when you said if you want to know about the plot. I was going to say just watch the first movie. Explains it all.
Yeah, because I mean the plot. Look, the plot of the movie adaptation, in its broadest strokes, is similar. Like, the DVD blurb says it's a special military unit fighting a powerful, out-of-control supercomputer. That part's a bit... But hundreds of scientists have mutated into flesh-eating creatures after a laboratory accident. That's broadly similar.
Yeah, they spend the first, 5 minutes in Umbrella's lab. A guy with a very dodgy-looking clamp system moving around this super killer virus, apparently with this pronged thing.
It's such a super killer virus that you have to wear a suit at the same time. Yeah,
but then you got this crappy little prong thing, and then he's just like...
That's a really worryingly...
It's like, what? Like, you'd think it'd be a lot more sturdy, but anyway.
Umbrella is such a high-end laboratory that they allow their staff to drink coffee over the rabbit corpses that they're dissecting.
What the hell? There's so many moments where you're watching it, you're going like, is it super like biotech sort of stuff, or is it just like whatever, like, you know, like The Office?
In your head, zombie, 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 hey, hey, hey. Hey.
But then it does cut to the mansion for a grand total of about 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's weird how much of the movie is set in the lab in comparison to the games, which are predominantly set in the mansion and kind of the surrounding areas.
The last third, maybe, of the game, not even that, is in a lab.
Not even that? Yeah. I have a theory on why that is.
What's that?
Would you like to speculate?
Yeah. Well, it was easier to make sets and shoot them from different angles and make it look like multiple different labs.
Yes, it's expensive to rent that mansion.
Yeah, that was my theory too.
Yeah.
We'll just shoot it from another angle, move a desk. It's a different room. Done.
Most of those lab shots are actually filmed in an abandoned German subway, is what I found out. Yep. Which explains as well why they, in the scene where they're like, we need to go through the high-tech cooling tunnels, it's just constantly leaking. It looks like a sewer.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Alright, so we've spoken about the setting of the film, but what about the characters? Now, some people have said that this film in many ways is just a cheap knockoff of James Cameron's Aliens. I would disagree, because, I mean, the characters are pretty original. You've got the grizzled head of the squad, the feisty female gunner, the jittery nervous soldier who always thinks the end is nigh, and of course the outsider in Ripley. I mean, Alice.
Game over, man. It's game over.
What do you think about Milla Jovovich's performance as Alice?
Oh, she's just bored. I don't know. She comes across as she's just bored, walking around like staring at stuff like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Like, even when they're all getting chopped up in a laser grid, she's kind of like, yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
So
the
what's
note
next?
The note I made here is Kuleshov effect. So for those of you who don't know, the Kuleshov effect is a film editing idea demonstrated by the Soviet filmmaker Lev Kuleshov. It was essentially like this mental phenomenon where viewers would make meaning from the interaction of two shots, more than like a single shot in a single location. So it was the idea that you could just have someone with a neutral expression and you could edit in any piece of footage and that other piece of footage would colour the neutral expression of the person.
Yeah.
And I think that's her entire performance throughout every Resident Evil movie. She has the same lost, confused face in every scene.
Everybody talked about that laser scene, the one on the bridge where it's like the grid comes through. I mean, it's stolen off Cube, but it still was an amazing scene to see on the big screen. Anyone you spoke to said, "Oh, that laser scene." Even if they hadn't seen the movie, they've just seen it in the trailer because it probably was the most expensive scene for them to shoot. So,
oh yeah, it definitely was impressive at the time. I remember watching it as a kid and just going, "This is the most badass thing I've ever seen." But honestly, as an adult, I've started to think about it a little bit more. And now I'm kind of questioning why the computer is even toying with them. Why doesn't it just, turn on every laser simultaneously and just blast them for a full 30 minutes to make sure everything is dead? Look, if you're going to try and cover things up, just make it easier. Build the whole facility out of lasers. It's visually quite cool, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And that's one of the biggest problems for me when it comes to this movie, is things happen for the sake of the viewer rather than making any kind of logical sense in the context of the narrative. And this can be seen best in my favourite scene from the film, and I actually think it's the best scene in the whole thing, but not because it's good, but it's the scene where inexplicably Milla Jovovich just wanders away from the action and just ends up in that kennel with all the dogs.
Yeah.
Has a fight with dogs that, in all honesty, look like a dog someone's just spilt their lasagna on.
They stapled their ham sandwiches to it.
Yeah. You can't dress a dog up. I'm sorry. It's like the Alien 3 tests where they tried to put the alien costume on the dog.
It's just cute.
And it's the cutest thing. And it's just
terrifying.
Yeah, it's so cute. And it's like, this is just like someone spilt their dinner on a dog. But regardless, there's this amazing moment in this scene where our main character, Alice, shoots all of these dogs, saves her own skin, has a moment to relax, but then takes a little look over to the left and, whoa, there's another dog, and it's a bit of a jump scare. But I just love the idea that this dog had been standing there for a couple of minutes, just waiting for the right moment to strike. And this happens throughout the entire bloody film. There's just zombies waiting for the right jump scare.
But sometimes it's not even a scare, it's just a random loud noise, and you're like, what was that? It's not like you jumped. You're just like, that was stupid.
Yeah, it was more distracting than anything.
Yeah, exactly. That ruined that moment.
Hello?
So you pretty much end up spending all your time waiting for the next jump scare, because every time it's going to go quiet, it's going to be something jumping out at you or someone banging around. And the problem with that is, if it's the same thing over and over again, it just becomes predictable. It just becomes boring. But look, we know that. What's more important is, we brought up the dog scene, we got to talk about the kick.
The roundhouse kick with the badass music and the slow-mo of her landing is meant to be badass, but it's so lame.
It's so lame. It's the best. It is the best, though, because you get this, badass, inverted commas, rock music playing in the background that just goes immediately silent for just the worst wet slap when she kicks that dog in the head. And just the clear dummy dog just flies away off screen.
It's like someone kicking a lump of salami.
Yes, yeah.
If this movie didn't have Resident Evil on the cover, it'd be fine. It'd be sci-fi lab adventure, But it's just a fan fiction. It just plays like a fan fiction. You can't help but feel like it was rushed. It doesn't feel well thought out. Like, a lot of the scenes don't even work well together. I think it could be a better movie if it didn't have the Resident Evil name on it, and they just took a bit more time.
Well, it's interesting you say it feels a little bit like a fan film, Nathan, because it actually is.
What?
Yeah. So what I mean by that is, Paul W.S. Anderson, he really liked the original Resident Evil game, and I'm assuming some of the sequels, as, you know, he's incorporated some sequel elements into this first movie, but he decided one day to write his own fan script for Resident Evil 1. Now, this script, called Undead, has been described by Paul W.S. Anderson as a ripoff of the Capcom video game, and it's pretty much what you see on the screen as the first Resident Evil movie. Now, for a long time in Hollywood, they'd been trying to get a Resident Evil movie made, and there were quite a few rejected scripts that had already passed through the production company. But when Paul W.S. Anderson heard they were looking for a new script, he went to them and showed them this fan script. And he essentially said, look, you can make this as the Resident Evil movie, or I'm going to go away and try and get it made as its own separate thing.
Really?
Yep, and to make matters even worse, one of the rejected scripts was actually written by George Romero himself, the great granddaddy of the modern zombie. When Capcom were trying to come up with an ad campaign to advertise Resident Evil 2 in Japan, they actually approached George Romero because, I mean, it made sense. He invented the modern zombie with Night of the Living Dead, kind of perfected it with Dawn of the Dead, and took it almost as far as it could go with Day of the Dead. So wouldn't he be the best person to make an ad for a video game about zombies? And the response to this was so positive that Capcom actually asked him to write a screenplay and possibly direct a Resident Evil movie. Now, obviously, this movie never got made, but the screenplay does exist, at least in a first draft form, and you can find it online if you're interested. It actually leaked years ago. I read it when I was much younger, and I'm pretty sure I brought it up with you, Nathan, when we were working in a video game shop together, and we used to just talk about, well, this stuff all day long.
Yeah, you brought it up and said, you know, George Romero wrote his script. I was like, what?
Yeah, and I recently reread it for this discussion, and you know what? It's okay. It's not perfect, but it is a first draft, and in many ways, it's much closer to the game, kind of including all the major set pieces. What I really liked about it, though, was that it dealt with this idea of large corporations that create weapons, essentially controlling the government. And in many ways, that's really relevant to now. And I mean, it makes sense. George Romero has always been a political filmmaker, even when dealing with zombies. And in many ways, it's a lot more serious than the movie we ended up getting. Now, the reason for this movie not being made is a little hazy. There's a few conflicting stories. Some people say the budget was going to be too large, and I mean, if you read the script, you can see it's got some pretty lofty ambitions. But other people say that Capcom just wasn't happy with the script. They just didn't think it was good enough to produce, which I don't really buy, because if Capcom wasn't willing to produce a bad script, then we wouldn't have any of the Resident Evil movies.
Yeah, and have you seen their animated ones that they made?
Yeah, exactly. That's another discussion.
They're not what you call good.
No.
Well, they are amazing.
They're amazing for different reasons, yeah. But in general, when it comes to the Paul W.S. Anderson film, would you suggest people watch it, Nathan?
Only if they're prepared to watch the rest of them, because it's just amazing to see the way everything changes depending on what's popular at the time. It's actually like a timestamp on cinema the whole way through. You can pick what movies are popular at the time with each film.
Yeah, that's really true, because you've got all the black leather and slow motion effects of something like Blade when it comes to Resident Evil 1. People often want to say The Matrix, but Blade actually predates The Matrix. With the third Resident Evil movie, you got the I Am Legend kind of comparison in the full post-apocalyptic landscape. And I guess with the more recent films, they must have been based on the fact that really crap films were popular, because that's the only way we can kind of explain them. Look, I know we've ripped on it quite a bit, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, actually. That's another film we might cover in the future. It's a perfectly fine Sunday afternoon film when you've got a bit of a hangover or something like that, and you just need to pass some time. Would you agree, Nathan?
That's all it's good for.
Look, I would argue it's got a bit more use than that, because every DVD can be a coaster if you try hard enough.
It's bullshit.
Alright folks, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Hey, maybe hit like and subscribe even if you didn't enjoy it. Why would you do that? Who knows? Maybe it's a spite like. Is that even a thing? Who cares? You can also follow us on Twitter by clicking the link in the description below. Until next time, stay safe and stay weird.